let me introduce our panel. And first, I would like to introduce Akeem Benamara, who's founder of Tech Africa News. Welcome, Akeem. Thanks very much for joining us. I know it's getting into evening there, but the most important thing, the reason why I've invited Akeem mainly, apart from his expertise on the continent of Africa, is because he's the only guy who still refers to me as young man. So, you know, there's reason enough to have you along. So thank you, Akeem, for joining us.
Thanks for the invite. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you meant to say young man there. Yeah, I'm just going
to say. Young man.
Yeah, thank you. No, so Tech Africa News is currently reaching what, about 37,000 industry professionals, and covers the whole media and entertainment space across the continent of Africa and indeed into the Middle East. Is that correct?
Yeah, so basically we call it the telco, media and broadband industry, what we cover. So purely B2B focused, and
yeah, and how long have you been? Consumer. How long has it been in existence, Akeem? What, 5 years or?
Yeah, we started 5 years ago. Let's say the goal or idea was behind it, because when you go to Europe, you have a lot of news and media platforms when you need to educate the market or to find some news about developments. But Africa was kind of lacking of having something independent. It was more likely driven by event organizers who then, for the sake of promoting their sponsors, shared some industry knowledge or developments. And we started with a little team. And at the moment, we have 5 editors and 2 commercial people, and trying to, let's say, really create something bigger out of it. And we're growing very quickly. So last year, we started also with LinkedIn and other channels, which were
excellent.
Nice audience.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening for you, Akeem. Next panelist is Dean Lyon. Dean is founder of Splinter Studios, a pioneer in graphics and visual effects, working in the TV and film industry. Thank you for joining us, Dean. You're in Florida, I believe, so a little bit more daylight for you rather than Akeem. It's obviously beginning to get dark, I should imagine. So thank you, Dean, for coming. Well, you've had quite a lot of experiences across a wide variety of areas, but you as far as Africa is concerned, you have worked there for what, many years, and increasingly so. What's the story?
So the interesting thing, of course, about being in the TV and film industry is that if you want to travel, you can always find a reason. And so I've spent quite a bit of time in a lot of different places in Africa, shooting music videos, shooting commercials, shooting feature films. What's interesting, though, is my latest connection with Kenya has actually turned into a Pan-African experience. And we started an animation studio there in the midst of the pandemic.
Quite an undertaking, but and I think we'll try and cover, at least in broad brushstrokes, a little bit about the film industry in Africa more broadly a little bit later. So thank you, Dean, and welcome. And our last but not least panelist is Florian Coleman from Aviwest. And good evening, Florian. Thank you for joining us from Rennes in France. So it's nice to see you. Aviwest, obviously live video contribution specialists. And Florian, you are the sales director for Africa. And I was just wondering how long you've held that position with Africa as a specific focus.
So I have been in charge of Africa at Aviwest for almost 10 years now. In the past, I was in charge of some other countries as well, but now I'm really focused on the African continent. And we have been traveling extensively across many African countries, like I would say 20, 30 countries so far. And we are promoting and deploying our products and technology in a lot of countries here.
Fantastic, and you're very welcome, Florian, and thank you. And actually, Florian, I thought I would sort of address the first sort of topic to you, and really just hearing it from your experience. I'm really interested in the current growth sectors and possibly the current growth countries. We're probably all fairly familiar with the fact that there's countries like Nigeria and South Africa and possibly Kenya where the word emerging is absolutely true, where there's a real growth to the media and entertainment space there, but they're certainly more mature than other perhaps regions. But what have you found in your experience, Florian? Where are you seeing the growth from an Avi West point of view, obviously?
So yes, you pointed out from an diverse point of view, we definitely see growth in almost every African countries. Because our technology is really a broadcast quality efficient way for live outdoor broadcasting, and in absolutely all African countries, you're having more and more broadcasters, TV stations, sport production, entertainment shows which are produced live, and our products are perfectly fitting this need, and while being mobile and cost efficient. And our products are mainly using the cellular networks, so the 3G, 4G, or now 5G networks as well, which have been deployed massively now everywhere in Africa as well. So it's making our products working on basically all African countries so far. So
good. Yeah, and I think I wanted to come to some of the drivers of the growth in the in the media and entertainment industry a little later. I mean, just to sort of provide some background to this, I've referred to a Morder intelligence report from 2021. The Africa entertainment and telecoms market was expected to register a compound annual growth rate of over 10%, 11% between 21 and 2026 was their projection. And perhaps just a couple of other sort of statistics to throw into the conversation. Obviously looking at Nigeria, much more sort of developed market than perhaps some of them, but it's estimated that there will be around 1 million media and entertainment jobs by 2025. That's PricewaterhouseCoopers report on the region. And the growth rates, and I wonder if you're seeing this as well, but the growth rates of sometimes 20% in a year. Certainly that was the case in Nigeria in 2014, and it's the media and entertainment is predicted revenues wise to gross $25 billion in 2025. I suppose, Akeem, are you picking up on this exponential growth, this rapid growth? What you're seeing, the people you're talking to, are they scrambling to keep up? And is that what they're talking to you about, or what are you seeing from a Pan-African view?
Yeah, I mean, if you see it from a growth perspective, is that you have much more and more mobile deployments in Africa. I mean, if you see that Africa itself is a mobile-first region, so I think the latest number I've seen, especially in the e-commerce marketplace, when you see Jumia in Nigeria, where they have at the moment 7.3 million active customers across Africa. So, which basically means that 75% of their customers use the smartphones to shop on platforms. And this gives, of course, a small, medium business or enterprises, of course, opportunities to dig deeper into that business and to make money, especially during pandemic times where everyone needs to get the deliveries and stuffs. But of course, you have challenges as well in the market.
And we'll certainly move on to some of those. But Florian, just back to you. Dean, I'll be coming to you shortly. So, Florian, is it the as Akeem was suggesting, the smartphone rollout, network penetration, connectivity improvements, and growth that are the key drivers in your experience, or?
Yeah, in our experience, and especially for the AVOS products, as our live video transmitters are using the cellular networks, it's definitely the growth of 3G, 4G, bandwidth, coverage, performances, which is driving the growth of our products and technology in each of the countries. And it's really interesting to see how fast it has been developing over the past 10 years. And bringing some questions about some potential customers sometimes asking to test our product locally in their environment to be sure it's working in their country as well.
But have you come up against frustrations where the rollout, although it's happening rapidly, isn't happening fast enough in certain regions? Is it uneven, or are you noticing the same sort of percentage growth in whichever region you choose?
So, in terms of cellular networks, we see a development which is not necessarily totally equal depending on countries, but quite similar still. So we don't have like big differences in which you would have a country with poor 3G coverage and another one with a perfect 5G, I would say. So that's quite homogeneous across Africa. What's very different from one country to another in our business and market is more the freedom of media, broadcasters, if there are like private broadcaster or only a public broadcaster, and also depending on like budget to start covering some events, we are having more and more customers using our technology to produce live sport content from some sports and in some countries where it wasn't produced live before. And so that's depending about those opportunities and the potential audience as well and the budget to start this kind of a production.
Right, great. Just to move the focus a little bit, Dean, onto what you're seeing in the film industry. So obviously these figures, media and entertainment, sort of covers the whole gamut of TV and film and digital driven entertainment. But the film industry, I mean, I think that probably many people who are listening into this conversation would be aware of just how huge the Nigerian film industry is. But I mean, something like 2,500 films per year as a guess. But are you noticing the same sort of levels of growth there? Because there are some sort of specific challenges, I would think, to the film industry as such. I was quite surprised to read that there's, only one cinema screen, for example, per 800,000 of the population in Africa. What are you seeing in say specifically the film industry, and is it the same sort of rate of growth that maybe Florian's encountering in Abbey West's focus?
Yeah, so so Africa is a huge place. That's the thing we have to remember, not only population-wise but also size-wise. So from North Africa to South Africa, there's quite a difference in each country. I think I heard someone else say, depending on the culture, depending on the government. But everyone's sort of known about Nollywood forever, Nigeria's film industry. We compare it to Bollywood, which is Mumbai, Chollywood, which is Chennai, India, and then finally Hollywood in the United States. So probably those are the top 4 film industries in the world. Now, the difference, of course, is that Hollywood puts out very high-end tentpole kind of projects, whereas these other numbers, like the 2,500 that you quoted, are going to be relatively low-budget projects that are based on local stories.
Yeah.
Very, very seldom do we see a Bollywood movie that's made for the rest of the world. Same with Nollywood. I was approached by them about 10 years ago to help grow their visual effects business in Nollywood. So I have seen that starting to get some legs to it. We've had quite a few animation projects coming from different African countries in the last few Oscars. And so I think that those are the 2 areas that are really going to be the huge growth areas. That, and also part of my mission with the company we started, is creating movies that'll be shown throughout the world. So movies that'll address that audience.
Yeah, you've been quite active in Kenya recently, Dean, but what other countries are emerging? I mean, and just to back up your point, I mean, it's 50 plus countries. 1.3 billion people, diverse cultures, as you said, diverse geographies, of course. So, that's a very good point, well made there, Dean. But, who is in the Nigerian film industry's wake? Who is really up and coming?
I'd like to say that it's Kenya.
Of course.
That's where I've been focusing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But, obviously South Africa has already been established as a world-class place, location, as well as generating films. I think it's Morocco and South Africa are the only two African nations with film incentives. So we hear how important film incentives are throughout the world. Certainly in the United States, we suffer through them. But that's going to be another area that we can keep an eye out on, is who's going to launch the next film incentives to help attract some of the overseas productions, and also to subsidize the local productions.
It's a very good point you make. There's a fairly recent UNESCO UN report out said only 19 out of the 54 African countries offer financial support to filmmakers. Would that tally?
Yeah, and I would guess that most of those financial offerings are to the local filmmakers, right? Not for people that are coming from overseas or other African countries to shoot there.
Yeah. And just one final question on the sort of film bit for now, Dean. The Egyptian film industry, I mean, do you recognize the term the Hollywood of the Middle East, or has that just been made up by a particular journalist? Because it's government owned, as I understand it, and that rather than a sort of free market approach, inward and outward investment, it's somewhat controlled by the Egyptian government. I just wondered if you knew more about that, or.
I've done work in Egypt, and certainly it was one of the go-to places for post-production in its day. And it's obviously a lot further away from South Africa. So if you were in the middle of Africa, you kind of had a choice of, should I go to Cairo or should I go to Johannesburg?
Do I head north or south? Yeah.
And most of the time we'd go to Europe. But no, I wasn't aware that it was government controlled, although I think, we saw in the recent splashes in Egypt that the government kind of controls the media outlets. So it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, I feel like we're, slowly segueing into some of perhaps the more specific challenges that companies would face in doing business, across the African continent. But and I suppose tying in, we were talking about the rollout, the smartphone penetration, digital rollout. Surely data, Akeem, data costs would be a key driver to that driver. Do you have any, views or thoughts or things that you're seeing about whether that's inhibiting or accelerating?
Yeah, I mean, it's crucial for the market. I mean, accessibility is very important for the people. And I mean, the latest numbers what I had was that nearly 50% of the population in whole Africa can't even afford 1 gigabit of data per month. So, and this is, I mean, it's besides connectivity and accessibility, and that majority of people are unbanked, they have a lot of struggles. But surprisingly, there's some markets when you see Nigeria or you see Egypt or you see or South Africa especially, where people still consuming services or having video subscription or video on demand subscriptions in place, but it's still, I mean, it's all about data and how can you make sure that you still have a good signal, even if you in rural or semi-rural areas, probably with 2G or 3G. But I think Avi West knows that better, how to deliver that. But it's one of the biggest struggles there, definitely.
Yeah, and Florian, Avi West, live video contributions specialists, and obviously an awful lot of news gathering in fairly remote terrains. and connectivity, and the rollout of network seems to be the key drivers, obviously, to the growth opportunities across Africa. But what are you finding that you're able to find solutions when there's connectivity? I mean, one related thing I was reading about is, as far as sort of mobile coverage is concerned, is that people have availability and access to mobile broadband networks, but possibly because of the data cost issue that Akeem was mentioning there is this thing called the usage gap, where there are people, with the available network, but do not use their mobile phones to get their content and things. So have you seen that? Are you addressing that?
So there are two parts for the product and technology we are selling and manufacturing. It's targeted to professional, like broadcasters, production company.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, the data cost is like never an issue in Africa for that. But Hakim is right. What's key is as well to have the audience. So if part of the audience is not able to connect or to afford the data cost, then that's reducing the audience and the benefit for our customers producing the content, especially for live content. Yes, what we have been facing in the past, but now it's like largely improved, is that our technology in the field is mobile over cellular networks, but back to the station, the video feeds which are received needs a good landline internet connection. And that was a major issue because landline connections were less developed, I would say, than cellular, even in main cities. That is clearly changing for a few years. And in most of the main cities in Africa, professional broadcasters, companies can have access to fiber internet.
Yeah. I'm conscious of time, and I want to, offer the conversation over to our guests and attendees, and give them the opportunity to come and engage with you guys. So thank you for sticking around. But I did want to sort of go round the table, as it were, and ask you, maybe starting with you, Dean, if you were to pinpoint one specific challenge that is kind of getting in the way of growth. Now, we've got the fantastic growth numbers, but I don't want to slip into sort of lazy stereotypes about there being, there are political instabilities in various parts of the continent, and there may be issues with other things. But if you could, identify one thing and say, if that could be addressed, then this ability to emerge and mature would be even faster moving. What would it be?
It's interesting that, we were talking about the broadband issues, because part of starting the animation studio in Nairobi is we actually started a virtual animation boot camp during the pandemic. And last session, we had 7 or 8 African nations represented with 30 students. And we hand out paid internships to the top of the class, and others start their own animation companies as a result of it. So probably one of the things we learned doing these boot camps on Zoom was that most people couldn't do it with their video on because their bandwidth wasn't good enough. Right. And so lots of times we wouldn't get to know the people as well because we couldn't see them. We also have to play back examples from Slack over Zoom. And sometimes we'd have some real issues. Even this morning, we had some real issues with not getting exact frame rate. When you're in the city of Nairobi, there is an opportunity to actually be on fiber and to get a fairly decent connection. Right. But it's still, once you get outside of the city limits, it's still very, very sketchy. We also have had people lose power in the middle of sessions, including myself. I'm in Fort Lauderdale. So those are some of the issues that are going on. I also think it's finances, the investment community. There certainly is a lot of interest of multinationals. They've already been set up in Africa, but they're expanding and they're looking at different markets. And there's a lot of international investment interest, particularly the Middle East as well as China. But what we really want to do is sort of attract the American investors. And in my perfect scenario, I would have an overseas investor, a domestic investor, and that way you feel like you're building an African company, as opposed to the Americans coming and taking over, which they're very aware of in a lot of places I've been in Africa. So I'm always really careful to say we're doing this for the local people. We're not doing this as an international move.
I think that's a sound piece of advice and a really good way to progress. I was actually really surprised. I was looking at the Africa report on download speeds for some of the countries. Now, this is a couple of years ago, but there was South Africa and Kenya were up fairly healthy levels. But, for Nigeria and Egypt, they were being outstripped by Rwanda and Ghana, were sort of twice as good as the download speed. So there seems to be sort of much room for improvement and things there. And as you say, but Akeem, maybe the same question to you. If there was one challenge that you could identify and therefore then one solution to that challenge that would drive investment and growth even faster.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about, if you see it from a broader perspective, it's all about the digital inclusion. It's not one specific thing, it's the overall thing. I mean, you have millions of Africans who not even possess an official postal address. Majority are unbanked. People are not educated. And if you see the digital inclusion could actually open endless opportunities to the people, but still there are many, even investment is there, many people, they fall behind due to affordability, knowledge or lack of knowledge, no equipment, no smartphone, no device. You see some countries, they're very smart, they're good in developments, they have new ideas, but Africa is just, as we all know, so crazy big and so diverse. If you see the sub-Saharan region, probably it's different developed than the East and the West and the North Africa. It's a big struggle. And we just can hope that they somehow find together. But there's some key players, the MNOs, especially in Africa, they're doing a good job with, let's say, banking solutions like VodaPay or MPay, wherever, where they help to give people the opportunity to have a bank account at some point and to, let's say, to live life and use the technology and education as well. But yes, you see a lot of investments, you see apps, you see a lot of interesting startups or let's say other technology vendors and software vendors. If you go to Nigeria or other countries, there is hope.
I mean, thank you for reminding us that, not only the vastness of the continent of Africa, but the median age of the population is very young, ambitious population. The median age is somewhere around 20 years of age, whereas it's more averagely nearer 30 and above. Obviously, the further into the Western world you get, the older it's getting. So it's a very, very good point. Florian, coming to you on that same question of, certain issues you're facing, and if there was one thing that you could.
So I completely agree with what Akeem was saying. Africa is really diverse, and it's totally different in terms of market, culture, business opportunities, or budgets and economy. Whereas you are in South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Morocco, or if you are getting in sub-Saharan country like Chad, Central Africa, and so on. So it's really a different way you can address all those countries and markets. And the solution you will use, you will deploy in one country is very different from one to another country. So when it's valid in all the aspects, like you were mentioning some example with the banking system, but it's the same regarding media, cellular, connectivity, and so on. Yeah. So in our business and our market, which is more into live production, the challenge is to for our customers is to build an economical viable environment around their live production. And you have many countries in Africa, for example, the first division of football, soccer is not broadcasted live. And the issue is that in terms of budget, most of the audience is watching like European football. And so it's also trying to build an ecosystem economically viable to be able to produce the content, make it high standards, and attract the audience. So back to more local content as well. So that's a challenge.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm very conscious of time, and I really want to open up the conversation. I, could talk for hours. Really, I've got so many questions for you. But I'd like to thank you very much for participating in this sort of formal part of the conversation. I would love to know what you think the future would look like. But why don't we just open that conversation out to our attendees? And I would just encourage our audience to explore the live platform. Come and engage with the guys. We've created some particular rooms for each of the guys. So please feel free to move around and come and chat. And if you're still wondering how you move around the environment, anybody with a live after their name should be able to help you by now. They should know their way around by now.
Hey,
so,
Neil.
Hey, Chris.
You did have a question in chat that you might want to take up here.
I've got everything full screen, so why don't I...
So Cindy asked, what would be a good first step or good first steps to take to start selling video type gear in Kenya or South Africa?
Who'd like to take that?
Maybe I can answer that.
Oh, really? You're going to have
as we are selling video gears. It's a difficult question to answer because it really depends which kind of gear and which country you are going to. But you really need to understand what the local requirements are, and it might be some equipment which could be selling very well in the US and which is definitely not matching the local market, whereas it is in Kenya or South Africa, for example. So the first thing is really to understand what the local players are in need of, and then what's key is to have a local presence as well. So either through a reseller or business partner or your own local office, but that's really key to have a local presence as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Anybody else want to have a go at that one, please?
Well, I think they are selling video gear in South Africa and Kenya already. So there are distributors and resellers and big manufacturers making the trip there to make sure their products are understood. And, if it's a growing market, which is what we've identified, then for sure you should start looking at, in particular, those two countries, if not other countries, that could be the good place to push your video gear.
Yeah. And Akeem, people who come in and speak to you about promoting their products via Tech Africa News, do they, do you get many of those people who are, manufacturing that they want to promote?
So video gear, not really. So we're mostly, on the solution perspective, software solutions, or say technical solutions, but not a lot of hardware vendors who are working with us. So we have clients from SES, Orange, or plenty of them. I mean, it's mostly about, let's say, solutions for telcos, for broadcasters, but not on a, let's say, hardware perspective, to be frank.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you, guys.